Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sales Tax Credit Relief Virtual Town Hall. My name is Katie Applegate. My pronouns are she, her, and I am so excited to welcome you into this space. We are going to be recording tonight. We value your time, so as we get started, if you have to step away, or if you have some things that you want to talk one-on-one about with us, we will follow up with you after the session ends. I want to go ahead and tell you guys a little bit about how this is going to go tonight. I am going to be hosting here and there, so you'll see me on and off screen. And then I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Shiloh Kantz, our Executive Director here at the Oklahoma Policy Institute.
Thank you, Katie, for that introduction. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. As Katie said, I'm the Executive Director for Oklahoma Policy Institute. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank. We've taken that think tank and changed it to the think and do tank. That's where Katie's role comes in. We're not just about putting our materials out there for people to read, but we want you to understand them. We not only want you to understand them, we want you to act on them. So tonight we're going to really talk about some interesting things that our legislature could do to help our families in Oklahoma. We are going to hear a presentation from our legislative outreach director, Angela Munson, followed by some questions and answers from the audience. And after that, we will hear again from Katie, and then Angela and I will be back to say goodbye and wrap it up. But we appreciate everybody joining tonight. Those that are watching this as a recording, we appreciate you watching. It means a lot that you're going back and staying caught up. I know lives get busy. Ours does. We've got a 13-year-old at home, and it's the end of the school year. So I know things are busy, but for those watching at home on recording, thank you. We appreciate you, and please also take the same action when you hear the instructions. For now, I'm going to turn it over to our legislative outreach director and my dear friend, Angela Munson.
Thank you, Shiloh, and good evening again, everybody. I'm just getting in from the Capitol, so if I seem a little frazzled, please forgive me. It's been a long day at the Capitol the last few days, and that's why we're here. I just want to express my appreciation to all of you. I wish I could see your faces, but I can't. So I see your names, and of course, I know many of you. So thank you for joining us tonight. We're not going to keep you long, as Katie said, but we do have something extremely important to talk to you about. Since I spent my days at the Capitol, and for a lot of years I have, and in communities, I think, first of all, about the power that people have really to influence the decisions that policymakers have. We really are, as a collective, an extraordinarily powerful group of people. Unfortunately, we haven't used that kind of power like we could. We've not exercised that power like we could. And as I watched the governor's second day of his governor's budget summit, I realized how important it is for the majority of us to voice those things that we believe in, that we think are important, those things that we know can help our families, our neighbors, the people who we love, the people that we may not even know, but that we know need some help. It is also important then for us as the silent majority of sorts to feel empowered and take some action. And that's what tonight is about, taking some action to really strengthen families in the state of Oklahoma. I want to tell a little story. Right before I came into the legislature in 1990, there was this big to-do about House Bill 1017. Some of you on the call will remember that. It was the first big education reform in probably ever in Oklahoma, but certainly in decades and decades. That little reform, which is really not small at all, took a lot of attention, gave a lot of attention to academic changes and transformations in schools and classrooms. But what didn't get talked about a lot was that it had to be paid for, of course. It didn't get talked about a lot publicly. It did at the legislature. And the legislature decided to increase their state sales tax by 0.25% to help finance the implementation of House Bill 1017. There was one senator, a guy named Frank Sheridan, who just thought increasing sales tax was extraordinarily burdensome to the people that he represented. He was a long holdout. 1017 was a negotiated deal, and it needed every single vote that it could get. So what Frank Sheridan did, along with some others, I am sure, was to negotiate something called a sales tax relief credit. It was a way to provide some relief to individuals who now were going to have to pay more taxes to finance the implementation of House Bill 1017. So the agreement in 1990 was that they would give $40 per person in a household when the household income was $20,000 a year or less. That was 1990. Fast forward to 2024, it's still $40. And it is still for households that earn $20,000 or less. Think about that. Think about, yeah, taxes have gone up, but the price of items have gone up substantially. That $40 is worth about $16 now. So yeah, the legislature realized this year, fortunately, that Oklahomans needed some relief, and they passed the elimination of the state portion of grocery sales tax. That was all well and good, but it's not all the taxes on groceries, and it's certainly just a small part of sales taxes that we pay on everything else that we buy. Diapers, if you have children or grandchildren, we pay taxes on over-the-counter medications. So the amount of things that we pay taxes on is great, but the value of those things, the cost of those things is greater. So again, the value of that $40 is minimized even more so. So several years ago, those of us who work at OK Policy, and many of you may be on the call, thought it was important to make sure the legislature understood that this sales tax relief credit had to be modernized. It was a great way to put money back in the pockets of Oklahomans who needed it most. So we have been working a lot at the state capitol to inform and educate, and to try to encourage legislators to do the right thing about people who need help. We get corporate taxes, franchise tax relief, we get a whole lot of tax relief. But when it comes to tax relief for the people who need it most, sometimes it seems like that falls on a deaf ear at the state capitol. So what we have done is propose to legislators that we modernize this concept by increasing that $40 to $200 per person in the household, up to $200 per person in the household. We've also said, legislators, we should raise that $20,000 cap to up to $60,000. And I use the words up to because the amount of the tax credit varies based on income. So if your income is around $23,000 a year or less, you may get the maximum $200 per person in the household. A single individual, if you're a family of three, that's $600 for that family. And we'll draw your attention in just a little bit to a chart so you can kind of get a better sense of what the value of that sales tax relief credit modernization. Well, we've been talking to legislators. And I'm going to announce today, because I was so excited and I didn't hear it because I was driving home from the Capitol, and I almost cried because I didn't hear Senator Treat, who is the President Pro Tem of the Senate, in the governor's budget summit with the Speaker of the House, Charles McCall, and other legislative leaders say something like, and I'm going to paraphrase, if you really want to talk about helping poor people, because that had been the genre, that had been the conversation of these individuals around the table, the governor and Representative McCall, we got to help poor people, we got to help working people. And Senator Treat said, if you want to talk about helping poor people, let's talk about the sales tax relief, little pause, he got credit in there. And so we were all excited. For the first time, we had a legislator in that kind of discussion talk about sales tax relief credit, at least mention it. And I'm going to fast forward. At the end of the conversation today, the House told the Senate, come prepared Monday when they will reconvene in these discussions with their tax proposal. It's our hope and our intent that we can influence enough legislators that the proposal that the Senate might put on the table would be this modernization of the sales tax relief credit. Let's talk a little more about how this credit works. So I think Dave has some information he's going to throw on the screen, and I'm going to show you this, talk a little about this and some other proposals, and then we'll stop and be prepared for you to answer, ask any questions that you might have. I hope you can see this. And if you can't, you can find this information. Well, maybe you can't find this information on our homepage. Can you find this information? Shiloh, nod your head, yes or no. No, it's not available.
We will share it in the email with the recording afterwards because it needs context.
All right, great. This is a comparison of the sales tax, the tax relief, the tax proposals, they call them tax cuts in the Capitol, that are being talked about or have been completed this year. To your far right, you'll see the grocery sales tax elimination. So when you look at those numbers, to your far left, you'll see family scenario. So families up to $23,900, that's maybe a McDonald's worker. That could be actually my granddaughter's mom, who doesn't work consistently. They got a value of about $65 from the grocery sales tax elimination. And if you're like some of the families that I know who actually buy a lot of their groceries utilizing SNAP benefits, they got zero benefit from those groceries because they don't pay sales tax on SNAP groceries purchased with SNAP benefits. So you see, it's not very much at all. And if you scroll down to the very bottom, the numbers get bigger based on income. The boxes and they're color coded so you can see kind of how they're grouped together. Yeah, you get a little more benefit from the grocery sales tax because generally you may spend a little more for groceries, but the people who get the biggest bang for the buck, doesn't matter if they buy more groceries or not, it's still people who earn over $600,000 a year, $408 average. These are average numbers for the grocery tax. Dave, let's scroll back up to the top. So what we propose is expanding the sales tax relief credit. That's that first box of the $200 per person in the household. That's for every family, regardless of your filing status. 200, if you make less than that amount, you're going to get $200 per person in the household. If you're in the next box, the second 20% of the income earners in the state of Oklahoma, if you're single, you're still going to get 200. If you're in a family, you're still going to get 200. But if you scroll down to the next box, and this is where we've kind of graded things, we've kind of created a sliding scale of sorts to try to make it go further and be not necessarily as expensive as some of these other proposals. If you're within this income category and single, you'll get $100. If you are in a household with children, or you're elderly or disabled, you still get the $200. So when you take a look at this, you can see as it goes down how that sales tax relief credit phases out. For single individuals at about $44,000, and for families, it will phase out totally after you earn more than the $59,999. But we also heard today in these budget discussions, and we heard them Monday too in these budget discussions, a whole lot of talk about a 0.25% personal income tax cut, 0.25%. And the governor has talked about this. The Speaker of the House has talked about this. There's been legislation to implement this. In reality, to utilize this kind of change to get us down to a zero income. As you can see very quickly, people at the lower income spectrum don't get very much at all. But if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, people who are in that 1% tax bracket, they make out like a bandit, $2,634. So this tax cut, that 0.25% tax cut in our personal income taxes, is heavily weighted to people who have a whole lot more money than most of us have. We also heard today some discussion about a flat tax. If you go back and look at your YouTube channel and do this, you'll hear the flat tax. Flat tax is everybody pays the same. It's a boon to the state. The state will be the biggest winner there with more than $400 million new money. And all of us will be the losers because we all pay more money with a straight across the board flat tax rate. So you can see that amount. It's not a whole lot more, but I guarantee you, for my son and his wife, both who work for Oklahoma City Public Schools, if they had to pay $250 more in taxes, they would cry. And this poor mom doesn't have that kind of money to loan to them for sure. there's a kind of change, and this got talked about a lot today, and this is really our biggest, I don't want to say competitor in terms of tax cuts, but yeah, maybe the biggest competitor, and that's the 4.75% flat tax with a higher standard deduction. What that does is it raises the amount of income that is not taxed at all. So the conversation today was about trying to get the first $23,000 of income totally untaxed. That's a good thing, because there is some great value to doing that. And we've supported eliminating these very low, costly tax brackets, so people who even earn $7,000 are still paying some state income tax. And if you look at that column, it's not a lot still for the poorest of the poor. It's kind of clustered right in the middle for everybody else. And then as you get into higher income tax brackets, you do start getting more. But the highest bracket under this provision would actually pay additional taxes. And, you know, it could be argued that they needed to pay more of their fair share. So that's kind of the concepts that are being talked at the Capitol today. And I think they're going to try to conclude this conversation, as I said earlier, by Monday. So it is our obligation as taxpayers. Oh yeah, let me say this too. The sales tax relief credit is a refundable tax credit. You don't have to be a personal income taxpayer or a filer in Oklahoma to benefit from this tax credit. There's a single, separate, standalone form that I complete for a lot of people who I do their taxes for free, mind you, so they can get that $40 or $80. I have a family I do their taxes. They called me today. They said, Angie, have you heard anything about our $80? You know, some of us wouldn't be worried about $80. There are a lot of families out there that $80 makes a difference. So think about, for that family, if they were waiting on $400, what difference that could make. So we have to do all that we can to ensure that legislators hear loud and clear that this really is the most reasonable way to approach tax relief in Oklahoma. It's the most responsible way for our state budget. Lastly, let's go all the way to the bottom. There's a cost to any of these things that we do. There's a cost. The sales tax relief credit modernization that we are advocating for costs the state about $157 million. If we go to the 4.75% tax rate and increase that standard deduction, the cost to the state is about $370 million. When we say cost, that's lost revenue. That's money that is not available to be expended anymore. And the scariest thing about all these proposals, except the sales tax relief credit proposal, is they really are tax changes. So that revenue is lost. And if ever the state needed that revenue back, then they'd have to have a 75% vote, margin of vote. 75% of all legislators in both House and Senate, you know, have to approve that tax cut. And the likelihood of that happening, well, it's not very likely. And in fact, it's only happened once since that constitutional amendment went into effect. So a sales tax relief credit, however, and I don't advocate this, so let me say this very quickly. If there was a downturn in the budget, I'd be doing all that I could to preserve this credit, because that means people's lives are being affected. But in reality, it's a simple majority to change the credit amount. Anything above 40 that we could get and keep is better than what we have now. So we argue at the Capitol that this is the most cost-efficient way to do it. It is the way to put money in the hands of Oklahomans who really would spend that money. So I'm going to stop right there and give you, those of you who are with us, an opportunity to ask questions. And there are a couple of ways that I think you can ask questions in the chat. I think everybody ought, just like regular Zoom, you can post questions in the chat. Katie's gonna come on back with me. Shiloh's gonna come on back with me. Or you can drop your questions in the Q&A section. So this is let me say this, a Zoom webinar is new for us. It's fun and exciting and we're having fun, but we think maybe this is only the first, second, third time. Certainly our comms director's first time manning the wheels, the mast, whatever you call it, to get us through this. So you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. So anyway.
Angela, you're doing
Yes,
a
my
great
sweet.
job too. We already have one bit of feedback, not a question, but just a comment from the Q&A section. From one of our attendees, they said the 0.25% tax cut is beyond unfair. So
we totally concur. It costs a lot and it doesn't get anything to the people who need it most. And comments are more than welcome as well.
Angela, I want to jump in here and say I was in Stillwater last night for a town hall with talking about the sales tax relief credit in person. And one of the people asked a question there about how many legislators are aware of the sales tax relief credit and are versed in what it is and what it does.
Not a lot. I, along with a few others, have walked the halls at the Capitol all this week, knocking on doors, passing out information, talking to legislators. I went in a member's office today, I talked to him briefly, and then I handed them the sheet. Now, mind you, he only has 4 years to go before he terms out. So that means he's been in the legislature 8 years. He says, wow, what is this? I've never heard of this before. Well, of course they haven't, because it was passed in 1990 when none of them were there. Man, I was around because I'm old. But the reality, and it's a bunch of them older than I am, let me assure you. But the reality of it is, all of those guys and their families, and probably most of the people that they know, may have always made more than $20,000 a year, except one person I talked to. And I'm going to say this, for those of us who advocated the Capitol, we walked into John Eccles. John Eccles is the House Majority Leader's office. He was not there, but his assistant was there. And we always talk to assistants because they're important people too. Tell them what we're trying to accomplish and what we'd like to convey to the member. Oh, she looked at the QR code. We'll talk more about that. She pulled it up. She looked at it. She asked so many questions. She says, I wish I had known about this. In 1991, I was eligible for this credit. And then she said, well, maybe the person who I paid to do my taxes, she said, it was $75. She said, it was so much money for me. I can only hope that they included that in. She talked about the child tax credit. She says, but I don't know anything about the sales tax relief credit. Then she went on to talk about her children. So this resonates well when people look at these numbers. I mean, golly gee, like I said, my kids work for Oklahoma City Public Schools. They both have full-time jobs. They fall right into this this eligibility for sales tax relief credit. These are working people who need some relief.
Well, and I think it's, to your point, it's really important to talk back about the person who said, yeah, that it's unfair, that 0.25% sales tax is unfair. I mean, you've got to make up at $55,000 up to $60,000, $92 a year, right? That's not a lot of money every month. That's very little money. And I just think, for me, when I think about this, these policies and the numbers, I really think about there's people behind them, right? And we've really got to focus on the people that are behind those numbers. And for me, I'd rather my $92 go into the community investment, right? That that revenue, the revenue to our state, that tax money is going to invest in our community, in our people, in our state. In Barnsdall right now, where we just had a devastating tornado. We heard them talk today on the live stream for the negotiations about sending aid. That is our duty as a state. And I think we sometimes get lost in the numbers. I don't think we do. I think some of our lawmakers sometimes get lost in the numbers. And I think I just appreciate people like you and Katie who are out there talking to people and educating the people and meeting with people to remind them that they have a voice and they have power to do things. So I just, Yeah, I was very struck by Angela and I were speaking after they walked through the Capitol the last couple of days, and she said, I would bet 50% of those legislators, less than 50% of legislators knew what this thing was, less than 50%. And I think it's a very effective tool to be able to target investment. If you got grocery sales tax elimination goes into effect July 1st, if you receive SNAP benefits, you didn't get any benefit from the grocery sales tax elimination. The sales tax relief credit would benefit you. I think that's a really important point that I think we even heard it come up today in negotiations. I was going to say, somebody mentioned about SNAP benefits not being helpful, and the retort that was what led to
if you want to really help poor people.
Yeah.
If you really want to help poor people.
Yeah. So we've got a question. I think Angela, I'm going to send it to Katie.
Yeah, speaking of how it all rolls out, we have a question about going over the cost totals and how the funds can be better invested long term.
Well, yeah, for sure. I think there are two sides of this revenue question. The state budget is about $11 billion. So some people would argue that 370 million is not a lot. But that proposal that's 370 million also has, and I didn't go into detail, another little caveat, and that is this trigger provision. So as the state revenue grows, then that 4.75% top rate continues to decline. So every time we go down about 0.25% or so, it's going to cost about $300 million. So if we finally get to a zero personal income tax, which it really is the goal of a couple of legislators and the governor, then we've just done away with one of our largest single source of revenue. I mean, it's crazy to think that we could even do that, but that's the goal of others. So we work really, really, really hard. We're working really, really hard to make sure that legislators understand if you remove this revenue and you can't get it back, then there are things that will definitely suffer. They talked today about OETA. I'm a fan of OETA and the need for towers. I don't know what you call them. They talked about mental health facilities. When they go through these agency budgets, you hear them talk about all these great needs. These are service needs. These are things that people, just regular people out there in education, things that people need. And that revenue no longer would be available. So at 11 billion, if we lost $2 billion of revenue, it would devastate the state budget. It would devastate the people in the state of Oklahoma. So there are anything you can think about that you think we need: better education systems, better roads, better bridges, more internet, easier to access internet. I mean, pick a topic. Those dollars could be better expended for that. But we think the best expenditure is investment in our people. And the key about the sales tax relief credit is it goes to people who are going to spend it. Those folks who call me about their $80, they're not waiting on that $80 so they can put in a savings account.
No,
they need that $80 so they can spend it for something. And that's what we need to invest in our economy.
Well, and Angela, I think you bring up a really good point there. The grocery sales tax already cut off that $370 million, right? That's a lower estimate than it will be next year. Next year, it will be 400 million because it's missing some months, right?
That's right.
So it was talked about today a lot about over committing cuts to not be able to make our recurring revenue needs, right? That's and right. We've all experienced, I know I've been on staff here when we had a close to $1 billion shortfall and had triggers going because 2 months earlier in December, our economic growth was high enough to help let that happen, right? So I think that these questions are incredibly important, and just appreciate the person asking about describing all of the costs and because it truly is okay policy. Our stance is we protect revenue. That's what we do. We want to protect revenue for the state because we know how hard it is to gain it, just like you said, because of State Question 640. We are willing to give revenue away this time. And I think that's a
The
really
people who
important,
need it.
right. I think that's a really important thing to point out here, because we recognize as an organization, our organization has felt it, our staff has felt it. Things are more expensive. Inflation is really hurting our people. And if we truly want to help Oklahomans, if we truly want to invest in Oklahomans, we have to bring the least of us up.
That's right.
$19 a year does not do that.
That's a McDonald's Happy Meal and
that's one trip to McDonald's
meal.
for three people,
really,
if you're lucky.
I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're lucky. I want to
Yeah.
mention one last thing before we call on Katie, and we're going to put you guys to work here on this call. We're going to ask you to do something. This is not one of those calls where you go and you get excited and you say, that's terrible, and that's something we ought to change and work on, and then leave and do nothing. Before you leave, we're going to ask you to do something. But I want to mention a comment that one state senator said. I was standing in front of the gallery, in front of the chamber, and he came out and we were talking, and he knew the proposal. He actually knew the proposal. He knew sales tax relief credit. He thought it needed to be enhanced, although he was not willing to be the one to push for it. Those are the dynamics happening at the Capitol right about now. But the one thing he said to me is, well, I think, why do we cut it off at $60,000? And I said, we were trying to be fiscally responsible. And, right now it's 20,000. So that clearly, 60,000 is clearly a whole lot more people. And then we have an interactive map. You can go to our website and you can look at an interactive map that will show you, click on a county. And if you click on that county, it'll tell you how many people are eligible for the sales tax relief credit, how many new people will get the sales tax relief credit, how many seniors can get the sales tax relief credit. You'd be amazed how many people in some, particularly these rural counties, how many people who do not qualify now. In some places, it's almost everybody in the whole county, because nobody makes, the state's median income is around $56,000 in a whole lot of rural areas. People just don't earn that. So
yeah.
I was glad and encouraged to know that there were legislators that understood that families with, that's what he said, 3 or 4 kids in a family, mom and dad both working, so it's 5 people in the household making about $60,000 a year, and they would not really be eligible for very much at all. He says they ought to be entitled to the full credit too. I agree.
Same. I agree too. Well, and I think it's important to say too, when we first proposed it 2 years ago, it was $180, and we actually had a Republican senator say, no, it should be 200.
200. That's how we got.
No, I do. I think that you're absolutely right that invest in our people.
That's right.
All right.
So
thanks, Angela.
So we're advocates. What we do is we believe in the power of people, but that power has to be exercised. Silence power is no power at all. So we don't want you to be silenced. We want you to do something. So Katie's gonna draw your attention and ask you to pull out a phone or do something. I don't know what she's gonna ask you, but please respond. Katie.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Shiloh. That was such a good Q&A section. And now we're going to move into what do we do with this information now that we have it. We want you to take some easy, quick steps by filling out one form that will go to your legislators to tell them that you support this expansion, you support putting money back in the pockets of your neighbors, of your family, of your friends, and of yourself. This is the QR code here, and if you're not techie like me, there is also the web address under it. That will take you directly to the form to fill out. We're going to leave this up for just a moment. You can fill this out while I talk. You don't have to look at me the whole time. And share it. Share it with people in your life. I know this topic can be a little bit intimidating. There's a lot of numbers. It's not the sexiest topic to talk about, right? But it's impactful and it really will make a difference in your lives. So you can take the words from me, give the QR code to your friends and tell them that this will put money back in their pockets. That's as easy as it gets. So Dave, thank you for putting that up for us.
Was that actually long enough? If you're on this call and you didn't get a chance to do that QR code, holler, because we're gonna
It's
finish
in the
early.
chat
We
too.
come back, put it in the
Yeah,
chat.
Dave dropped the
Yes.
link in the chat. Yeah.
Oh, good.
okpolicy.org/action.
And I'm going to tell you, because this was a question last night. One lady, we've been having town halls across the state. Attendance has been not as good as we would like, but we're doing what we think we should be doing to try to give people an opportunity to again have the power that they have under this representative form of democracy that we have. When you go onto that QR code, it's going to bring you right to a screen that asks for your name and some information that you have to complete. One lady struggles. She says, it's not sending, it's not sending. Well, it also asks you for your prefix, Mr., Ms., whatever. You got to complete that too. So that was every field that's there has to be completed before it'll let you submit it. And if you want to see what it's sending, you can, I never know if you should go, you call it scrolling up or scrolling down. But if you go one way, you'll see just what we kind of talked about today, the importance of the message, your information to fill out, and then you'll see the email that actually gets sent. It also says name. The same young lady was trying to type her name into that space that's in parentheses. You don't have to put anything there. It will autofill. So don't worry, just fill in the blanks that look like a form that the system will find your legislator. It'll kick a personal email out to them just from you.
Thank
And
you,
Katie,
Angela.
yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm still on. Thank you both for this. I want to turn our attention slightly from taking action to becoming advocates. We've talked a lot today about how this impacts our neighbors, ourselves, our fellow Oklahomans, and there's a way to keep the momentum going for this topic and other topics. One of those ways is to get involved with Together Oklahoma, which is the outreach arm of OK Policy. Angela and myself are on the outreach team, and we will work with you, one, in your regions, right? The things that are closest to your home, the local communities, the local topics, anything that you want to bring up and to stay involved in. We have regional organizers in almost every area of the state. I am in the Southwest. Austin is in the Northeast in the Tulsa area. Dion is in our central area in the OKC metro. And then our last organizer is Roxanne, who's in the Southeast region. Getting involved in these local Together Oklahoma communities. Our groups are wonderful, and our first opportunity is to fill out the form for the sales tax relief credit, but we will have more opportunities coming up this summer for listening sessions. So stay involved, stay active, and stay in touch. And then another way you can stay in touch with us and continue your advocacy, continue to make Oklahoma a better place is through our affinity groups. The affinity groups are the policy groups that mean the most to you. These are statewide, they're topic-based. So we have 4 of those. We have our criminal justice affinity group. We have our Thriving Families affinity group that looks at housing and food. We also have our Healthy Oklahomans affinity group that looks at Medicaid and health topics. And finally, we have our Protecting Democracy affinity group that looks at staying involved civically. If any of those topics interest you, there's an affinity group for you. You do not have to stay in the lines of one group. There's a lot of interaction between the groups, and there's a lot of topics that overlap. So if you are someone that is fired up about criminal justice and about health, be in both. We encourage you guys to find and stay active with us. And if you're new to this space, that's perfect because we have people like myself, Angela, Shiloh, and the rest of our team that can walk you through and exactly what to do for the people in your communities and in your topic areas.
Well, I just want to come back here. Angela, any last comments before we close out this wonderful evening together?
I just want to ask people who are here with us tonight to share this information. I feel compelled to say this because I may not get this opportunity many more times, but we live in a form of government called a representative democracy in this country. I believe in it. I think it's the best form of government that exists anywhere in the world. And it's based on the principle that every person has a vote, has a voice, and the majority rules. However, when only the minority votes, that means the minority rules. And that means many of us technically don't have a vote. And this notion of representative democracy just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And what we get sometimes is when we think, why did they make that decision? Or that choice was perverse, it was bad, it hurt me, it hurt them, it was whatever. Always remember that decisions are being made in a whole lot of cases by individuals that were elected to office by only the minority. So we have a responsibility not just to act ourselves, but just try to engage somebody. If there's someone in your house, share the QR code, share the link with them, tell them to write a letter too. We have until Monday, guys, to convince somebody on the Senate side to bring to the table on Monday afternoon the sales tax relief credit as an option for real sales tax relief in Oklahoma this year. That's going to take a whole lot of us, a whole lot of ones of us is collectively acting to really convince legislators that, yeah, people really do mean what they say. This is important. So I just don't want you to do your part. Do that. And I say thank you. And we appreciate that. But just do a little more to make sure that they understand this really is important to us. And with that, Shiloh, I'm off my soapbox.
Well, I love your soapboxes, so please don't stay off them long. But no, I'm with Angela. I think we have one of the worst voter turnouts in the country, in our state. I don't think that's the legacy we want. And I don't think that's the legacy we choose. And I think that I've had the pleasure of serving with this organization for 14 years. What I do know is the needle's moved. We today watched our second set of live streamed or in the room negotiations from both chambers and the governor that we've been talking about for years and thought was a pipe dream that would never happen. And it's happening because they recognized it. I don't even think it wasn't an okay policy. It wasn't us. It was just the idea. Yeah, that's how it should be. That's how it should be. Oh, and we've got one more. I would send to both. It goes to both, I believe. If you send, yeah. So there's a question in the chat that says, should we send to reps or senators? If you click on the action alert, it will send automatically to both. If you have a relationship with your legislators, send to both. Yeah, they both need to hear it. The House needs to also be pushing their leadership to accept the Senate's proposition of it. We've talked at length with the leadership, and we've talked at length with members, and they know that Oklahomans need help. We know Oklahomans need help. And the one thing we can agree on with them every time is we all want the best for Oklahoma. So at the Capitol, we show up as helpers. What do you need? What policy do you need more information on? How can we help? And this is one of those places where we're trying to help. We don't, again, OK policy does not normally support eliminating revenue. We are all for giving this money away to the people who need it most. So tonight, I'm going to ask you again, please, please, please complete the advocacy alert. Share it with the people you know. Share it off of our social medias. We've got all the things in all the places. And then we want to see you. We want to meet with you. We want to talk with you. So venture on over to the links Katie shared. They're in the chat too. We'll also email them to you after this to togetherok.org. There you can find events, get involved, sign up, and do all the wonderful things. Because you matter, your voice matters, And that's power. Your voice is your power, and we want you all to use it and embrace it. And then we want you to take that power and empower somebody else, because your people around you need you to peer pressure them into understanding how very important it is for us to no longer sit and be apathetic to what's happening in our state. This state can be beautiful and wonderful, and we know it can be, but we all have to do it together. So I leave you with this: when you know better, you do better. Get involved, use your power, use your voice, and join us at OK Policy and Together Oklahoma to push for a better state and help for our people who need it most with sales tax relief credit. Have a good evening, guys.